Do my best. I'll do my best.
Yeah. So we'll just start and we'll just see how it goes. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Could you just introduce yourself and your role at Britannica?
Sure, I'm Jeff Wallenfeldt, and I'm a senior editor and the manager of Geography and History.
Great. So, Jeff, some of our previous episodes as of late have been very science focused. But with 4th of July coming up this weekend, I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about one of the most important dates, maybe the most important date in our nation's history, and specifically to talk about the Declaration of Independence. This document announced the separation of the 13 colonies from Great Britain. My first question really is, why did we need an official document, and who was it meant for?
So it's not a declaration of war because they had already been fighting. It is a statement of nationhood and statehood. It's telling the world of nations that this group of 13 colonies is constituting a new nation on the planet, a new country on the planet. The body of the Continental Congress at that point appointed a 5-person committee to write a larger statement of independence. And that committee was made up of Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, John Adams of Massachusetts, Roger Sherman from Connecticut, and Robert Livingston from New York. So those 5 people went to work in June on drafting a Declaration of Independence. Jefferson was kind of a ascendant writer in the group, so they let him come up with the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. So it's largely his words, and then those other 5 folks responded to him.
We voted that we wanted to separate on the 2nd, and then this was verified on the 4th, correct? Is that why we celebrate on July 4th?
Right. So what happened is then on June 28th, the Committee of 5 reports or presents the draft of the Declaration of Independence to the larger Congress. And then they began a debate on the broader Declaration of Independence. So the 2nd through the 4th, they debated the Declaration of Independence and voted on it and approved that on July the 4th.
So Jeff, if we look at the document, it's broken down into 3 main parts, correct?
Right. The first part is the preamble, which establishes the right to revolt. It establishes the right to have a revolution or to revolt and to declare independence under certain conditions. And then the next section is the grievances, which outlines what those particular conditions are, those grievances that the colonists have against Great Britain and against George III. And the last part is the resolution or the actual declaration.
Got it. So I just want to read some excerpts from it, and I'm hoping you can kind of help us understand some of the language since it was so far back. One of the most famous passages that's been debated for centuries is from the preamble. And it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Looking back on that language and the year 1776, how is Thomas Jefferson measuring equality? Because if you look at history, slavery wouldn't be abolished for almost another 100 years. The women's rights movement didn't start to the mid-1800s. So how was he really measuring what equality meant at the time?
That passage and Jefferson himself and his thought is used by people all across the political spectrum and interpret as meaning many different things. I think basically what Jefferson is talking about is saying that the English colonists are not being treated, they are not given their equal rights as Englishmen. They are not natural rights that are devolved to them and that are being denied to them by the crown, by George III. Is he saying, though, that all people in the colonies are created equal? Probably not. He is talking about, in all likelihood, is talking about white men and probably white property men, excluding those people that he would have thought were not part of civil society. So that would be very likely that he did not mean enslaved people or that he did not mean women. And so that language then would be given new meaning with someone like Abraham Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address, where he looks at it and says that all people may not be created exactly identical, but all people are created with the same political and human rights.
Got it. So this passage has really been the foundation that we've been building on since 1776.
Absolutely.
And still talking about today. From there, we get into the list of grievances. Some of them seem pretty straightforward. There was 27. They say things like, for cutting off our trade with other parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury. What's the percentage that we were unhappy with the way that we were treated from a taxation point of view and from trade? Was that kind of a really large part of it?
Oh, I think you can look at it in several ways. You can break it down like by that, or you can break it down by saying how many of the grievances are judicial, how many are about executive, how about many of them are about the legislative. A bunch of them are responses to the Quebec Act of 1774, which really angered the colonists.
Interesting. So there's a couple different ways to break down the grievances.
Right.
There were some other ones that I think were less straightforward, or maybe it was just the language. One says, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. What is that saying?
Well, since about 1740, the colonies were able to determine their own rules for naturalizing citizens in the colonies and encouraging. They realized the importance of immigrants and really tried to encourage immigration. And in 1773, George III took away their right to do the legislation. He did that because he had been advised that the growth of the colonies was not a good thing because they were getting too independent, and he wanted to find a way to try to slow down immigration, both from Great Britain and from Europe.
Interesting. So he was trying to prevent growth, essentially.
Right.
Now, as you get through the 27 grievances, you finally get to the last part, which is really the Declaration of the Independence, which is also has another very famous phrase that a lot of people know, which is that these united colonies are and the right ought to be free and independent states. This passage is taken directly from the motion that had been introduced by Richard Henry Lee and adopted by Congress on July 2nd, before it began debating the committee's draft of the Declaration. And this was really kind of the statement that told Great Britain, we're going to form our own country. Would that be the right way to say it?
It is. Because the Declaration is a statement of nationhood, of the declaration of the creation of a new state.
Got it. And then that was obviously to send a message to the king and to Great Britain. But from what I read, there were other goals with this document, with this Declaration of Independence. One of which was to actually gain support from other countries. And there's an excerpt that would support this, and it says, "In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people." To me, this kind of reads of us saying, like telling the rest of the world, look, we tried to work with Great Britain, but they haven't changed. And so this is why we've made the decision to form our own union.
Right, I think that's right. It is kind of a justification. And there's no question but that when you're talking about trying to influence other countries in the world for some support, there's no question but the colonists were sort of looking with one very expectant eye towards France. And it's also a statement to the people of the colonies. So this disparate group of people know what they have in common and what it is that they're fighting for, what they're rebelling against.
So throughout history, has the Declaration of Independence inspired other revolutions?
Yeah, I think that's unquestionable. The ongoing American experiment in democracy. Can a representative government and a government by the people stand?
Do you think that these founding fathers would think that in 2020 we would still be debating a lot of these issues?
Yeah, probably. I think they would. I think they might be surprised that we're still operating under these same principles. But of course, that's a huge judicial argument that takes place about whether there's strict interpretation of the Constitution and so on. But I think they might be surprised. Jefferson thought that you'd need to change the government every 20 years or something like that, and kind of came late to the idea that his words would have lasting significance.
So Jeff, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today about the Declaration of Independence. I think there is obviously a lot to unpack with this document. something that's still so relevant today. So I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.